Hi guys.
Hi, I'm Jelle.
My name's Steven.
And
Jelle, what are we going to talk about?
yes, so you are familiar with the principle of IAC?
Yes, infrastructure as code.
Infrastructure as code. Why would I want to use that as a developer?
Because you want the handwork is always more effort, and of course you want consistency between environments, between deployments.
Yeah. So basically, all my infrastructure, all my database dependencies, all the other potentially cloud resources that I want to use, I want to define that using code. And then I want to make sure that it runs as part of my pipeline. So if I deploy my application, it will also check using my infrastructure as code. Okay, do I need to do anything here? And usually you do that in a declarative way where we're like, okay, I just want, when I'm done, I want it to look like this. You do all the work of determining what you need to do to get there.
And of course also the source control, so you're versioning when you make changes. And
Yes.
you think, oh, I screwed something up.
Yeah.
You can look back what happened.
Yeah. So what do you use to define your infrastructure as code?
Nowadays Bicep.
Correct.
Early days, of course, ARM. So that's most of the time what I'm using.
And are you in a big team?
Yeah, pretty large. 4 teams for a single product, so that's quite large.
And of all those developers, how many are experienced Bicep writers?
Not a lot. I must say that Bicep already is much easier to read and understand than our ARM was. So that's a big step up. But still, it's you always see that a lot of specific developers take on those changes and feature changes.
Yeah, and if we're talking about, I believe you guys all work in C#, right?
Yeah.
How many of the developers are handy with C#?
I hope everyone, because otherwise we made a judgment.
So I think this is enough of a context setting, and I'll, infrastructure as code, we're diving a bit deeper, and I want to take a look at a specific form of infrastructure as code. It's called Pulumi. So I'm going to start with the demo, and then we'll do some theory, because
why not?
We're changing it around for once. So first you'll need to actually set up your Pulumi. In this case, I've already set it up on my local device. There's a lot of ways, of course, to set it up. Documentation, you can follow along. Okay. But then I'm going to select my cloud. So in our case, it's going to be Azure. But there's options here because Pulumi is, as they say, cloud-agnostic. And then I'm going to select a language. And I'll be like, I want my infrastructure as code written in TypeScript, JavaScript, Python, Go, C#, Java, or in yet another markup language. I'm going to go with C# because that's the most interesting for us to actually also dive into what is created.
Okay, sounds interesting.
The get started is not a wizard that works. It's going to give me instructions on how to proceed locally. So it's telling me, hi, you want to create a beautiful, let's do that once more. You want to create a beautiful project. So let's make their demo pro. There we go. And let's go to that there. And then we use the Pulumi command to create a new Azure C#. So this command really speaks for itself, right? So it's I've chosen Azure, I've chosen C#. It wants me to create a new Azure C#. It creates a basic demo project. This is basically just a quick gen where I get a starter project. Very cool. And now it will start asking me some questions because the get started is like, okay, this is all you'll need to do. Now follow whatever is working. So I'm fine with demo pro as a project name. I'm fine with that beautiful project description. But now it's asking for a stack name. So a stack is a theoretical concept that I have not explained because we're starting with the demo.
Yep.
But if one of the names suggested for your stack is dev, it makes sense that a stack is basically similar to what we would call an environment. So dev, test, acceptance, production.
Okay.
But it's up to you. You can also use your stacks for some completely different kind of hierarchy. But basically a stack will always translate to you want 95% of the different stacks to be the same, but there's going to be some configuration difference. So let's just say, fine, dev sounds like a great idea. And it's now, it wants me...
So this the CLI tool, it's also available for Linux?
Yes. It wants me to set an Azure location to use. And now, unfortunately, I cannot see. So I'm going to make sure that I type it correctly. So, and it's saving it. If I typed it correctly, apparently the CLI has a bit of trouble showing me it, but if I typed it correctly, I will be able to deploy. But for demo purposes, it's fine. If I don't type it correctly, I will not be able to deploy, and it will give me an error, because this config is specific to Azure, where
so
Azure is
really
going...
looking at, okay, what location does Azure have? And
Yes.
do I know this?
So for AWS or Google Cloud, it would not ask me for an Azure location, because that makes no sense. Okay. Okay, so now we have a new project ready to go, and it tells me that it's created some projects here. So if we go there, we can see that it's created some a little project, and I can open it.
So it's just a C# project which you can open in Visual Studio, and Visual Studio will recognize it as a C# project.
It is a C# project. It totally is. So.
It's a console application or a library? Or?
It is. I believe it's a console app, but it really doesn't matter, because you're going to use the code to create your. Clearly it's a console app, and it basically defines in C# what you want to do. So it tells me, okay, very cool. You want to create a new resource group called resource group. I'm fine with that. You want to create a storage account for demo purposes. Fine. You'll need some keys. And there's a primary storage key. And we're going to set that. That's the program. I can type in anything here. And this is all, these are all actual imported objects. So I have a lot of Pulumi specific Azure native.
I already see your usings at top, and I also see that things like storage account and SKU arc are highlighted.
Yes, so I am actually using defined interaction with the cloud. Pulumi will then translate this later to some generic instruction, and then it will translate it back to an Azure specific instruction. Okay. And of course we have YAML files, so basically there we go, and I typed it correctly, lucky me. This is just a program. I can check this in, I can add this to my source code. I can, instead of a bicep file or a YAML file or an ARM template or whatever, I can run this C#. You
can also just add this project to your existing solution.
Yes, and there's also ways to reverse engineer this, but that goes a bit beyond what I'm willing to show today. So it now tells me, okay, you have this project, it's ready to go, you might want to deploy it to the cloud. So what I haven't shown, but of course what I have done, is I've connected my Pulumi account to my personal Azure account, so it knows where it wants to deploy. That setup is also all there in the documentation, but for more business-like projects, you would of course connect there's a number of ways of connecting to your preferred cloud supplier safely. So I'll use the command that they've explicitly told me to use, and you can see that this is also declarative. So it's going to look at what it wants, what I want to be done, and what's currently there. Which is basically how we, with Azure, we've always worked like this, but for some clouds this is new. And if I just use the Pulumi preview command, it would only show me this preview, but now it shows me this preview and it asks me, do you want to perform this update?
If I look correctly, you actually see what it's going to do. So it's going to create 3 resources?
It's going to create exactly what I've specified in code.
You don't have any existing infrastructure set up yet for your demo, so it's going to create them all. Yes,
this is completely empty because this resource group is based on the file there. And do I want to perform this update? Yeah, I'm fine with performing this update. It tells me that I can look in my Pulumi account to see the status, which I will do in a minute, but it's now going to actually perform a deployment to the cloud. I do not recommend to do this way for actual applications, but just to show you that it's really easy, and if you can read C#, you can understand what you're doing.
But the preview command could be handy for troubleshooting or seeing what's happening.
Correct, yes. And I will, it's taking a few seconds and it tells me it's created. Very cool. Let's first go back to my Pulumi account and look at my stacks. Well, here we have a demo pro, so ignore this one. I have created one before, but I can look at my demo project. That's the stack I've created for the dev. And okay, let's take a look at that one. And all right, so we have a primary storage key. That was the output.
Yeah.
I'm going to remove this anyway. So, I am really sorry. I don't have the rights to do that. It tells me how it was configured. I can now add tags, but it has added some tags by default. I can of course configure that in code as well. I can also see a historical update in my Pulumi account, but I can use Pulumi in a variety of different ways where I do not need the Pulumi dashboard. I can just use, I don't know, Azure DevOps or Jira or Jenkins or whatever. I can use whatever I want to deploy using Pulumi, as long as I follow a few rules and a bit of configuration. Okay. So I have not actually deployed this stack. I've just updated in the cloud, but there are 4 resources associated with it, and it will even allow me to just immediately go into the Azure portal. So let's do that. Now let's see, it's going to ask me to log in, and I'm pretty sure that I will now have to get my phone live. So while you wait, I will log in, because security first, of course. So I will open the authenticator, and I will get a beautiful "Please arrive while I wait." Yeah. So it's still secure. Yeah, I'm gonna wait for the authenticator because I'm not sure what my password is because I haven't used it in a long while. So first, let me show you some different features, and then I'll.
Okay, but in the end, it just points you to the portal, so you can just look at that resource.
It is there, I'm pretty sure, and I will do this behind the screens, and I'll first go back to the theory, where we just saw this beautiful slide. So Pulumi. Yeah. Wow. Basically, the advantage would be you told me my developers don't all know Bicep; they do all know C#. So do it like that.
Language is the most powerful thing.
Well, the cloud-agnostic part could be very powerful too. I don't know many customers that use multiple clouds, but they do exist. And if you want to shift clouds, this would be really useful because you just have to change around your configuration and suddenly you can shift clouds where normally that would be... a
lot of work.
Yes. Well, you would need all your Pulumi files redefined to use the correct namespacing and such, but your deployments can save a lot of time. So there are competitors, and you've potentially heard of them. I would add Bicep potentially to this list, but it's a bit different because both Terraform and CloudFormation, that's a package, and Bicep is basically just a structured language.
Yeah. Basically, just Azure CLI, you're throwing a Bicep at and saying good luck.
So is it better than the competitors? Terraform is really big. That's the major player. Is it better? Yeah, Pulumi already has some advantages, but Terraform is really good. AWS CloudFormation, it says in the title why it's not a direct competitor because it is specific to AWS. But from what I've heard, I don't know if you've ever worked with it, but CloudFormation is also very nice. So Pulumi is just another really nice thing in a list of really nice things where the only thing you shouldn't be doing is using nothing on that list. So if you're not using Bicep or Terraform or AWS or Pulumi, you might want to be thinking about, I might want to start.
Terraform it's very large, and maybe the step to get used to it is a bit tougher. I could see that. Yeah. So I've already shown you the language support and the providers in a demo, but just so it's there again. Thank God we can still use Visual Basic.
Yes, because without Visual Basic, where would we be? But you can also use YAML. So it's a really interesting one where you use YAML to get infrastructure as code. I like it, but it's a bit of a
just using Bicep in that case.
It's a bit of an inception.
Yeah.
So
what you said is it's transforming that specific language to an intermediate language of its own, and then it just transpiles it to the cloud specific.
Yes.
So in this case.
Yes. So
ARM probably.
Yeah. So Pulumi takes care of all of that. You type your language targeted towards the cloud you intend, and Pulumi makes sure that it knows how to handle that, and it will write it to the specified cloud. And there's a number of other providers that are not in the demo. So there's all kinds of little packages, and it's an open source project. So there's a lot of people just adding stuff like, oh, if you want to go to my cloud, then you can use Pulumi as well. Look at that.
And you can build your own packages if you would like to use it for something specific.
Correct.
And it's not yet available.
Now, as I mentioned, we're using declarative intent. So Pulumi just has, you can create read updates to a number of providers, but it will look at the last deployed state to determine what it needs to do. So yeah, it has a very rich environment.
I know from using Bicep in my pipelines, you always just use the create or update resource group, and if you want to delete something not out of the box, it is possible, but it's not standard practice. If I see it on most places, I know Terraform does that, so you need to be very careful because it will delete resources if they're not declared anymore.
Yeah.
How does Pulumi do that?
Same Z's. It will delete something if your intent is not to delete. It is to not have it anymore. Yeah. Which especially on production is something that you need to take into account. But you can just add a lock. If you build it the right way, it should not be easy to accidentally delete. Yeah. So there's a lot of ways to interact with Pulumi, as I showed you. You can do it locally, but there's integration with all kinds of CI/CD tools, and there's a lot of cool, interesting stuff where maybe it works, maybe it's only in the beginning stage. Pulumi is new and exciting. Well, not that new, but there's a lot of stuff where you can look
Definitely
at.
Exciting.
No, good. So and there's a lot of providers, so you can mix and match, but you'll need to figure out exactly how the specific combination works. It's not that hard, but it is specified. Yeah. So is it a fit for you? I like that it's. I like programming in C#. Big surprise. I'm not a big fan of writing stuff in Bicep. I can do it, but I tend to struggle a bit more, especially since I don't often use it. If I use Bicep, it's going to be in one big Bicep frenzy, and then a few weeks of tweaking, and then I'll have a lot of weeks where I'm not doing anything with Bicep. This is, as an architect, this is also a little bit true of C#, but at least a lot less. So I like that I can write in C#.
Feels more familiar and more safe.
It is true, yes, for me. But if you would be someone who would love writing in Go or YAML, You can do that. If you like writing in Bicep, do that. But another thing that I did not really mention, but you already immediately grasped, was I was writing code in Visual Studio. So I can get all the little red wriggly lines. Yeah. I get all the errors. I get refactoring. I can write unit tests on my IAC. I can basically use my IDE as a programmer for my IAC.
Yeah, your IAC gets more integrated into your product, and it's not just a standalone thingy, but oh yeah, I gotta do that. And
correct.
A lot of times I see the developers are developing a Visual Studio, and then I have to edit some infrastructure, and then they're opening Visual Studio Code because it works better for their Bicep. Then I'm like so isolated from each other.
But if you want to do Pulumi, if you're an Angular developer and you want to use Pulumi with TypeScript, then you can stay in Visual Studio Code if you're more happy with that. So you can choose.
Because if you have a front-end project where you have front-end developers that use Angular, you can mix and match based on the product or the component you're using.
I love that. And of course, you can add packages, not even specific Pulumi packages, but I can add all kinds of packages that are more specific to, for example, .NET, that I would not be using in my Bicep packages, but I can add them to my IAC. Yeah. And of course I can do linting, formatting, resharper, create clean code without knowing how to create clean code, basically. Nice. Again, testing, CI/CD integration, very easy. It's declarative, I've mentioned this, and you can write solid code. You can reuse. You can say, I have a class that basically has all the configuration for a storage account. I want to use that in a completely different resource group in a completely different part. Well, this is not new for Bicep can also do this, but in C# it's so much easier. So it's really cool.
Make a NuGet package internally where you have some standard components that you can use inside your project.
Yes, you could. And it's open source, which I think is always a plus. But there's also some cons. There is a bit of a learning curve, and I've Googled around a bit because I wanted to make sure that I understood what Pulumi does. And if you Google around a bit, or Bing around, you get a lot of documents where you're like, oh, this is exactly what I'm looking for. And then it's just some AI-generated answer, because there's a Pulumi AI, which is really cool, where it's just like a co-pilot that will answer all your questions. Yeah. But it has already answered a lot of questions, and they've all been indexed into Google. And some of the AI-generated answers are, of course, complete hallucinations. So there's a bit of a learning curve.
With all AI, you still have to interpret it and think, okay, this is the correct answer. Or
this is a problem for anything on the internet nowadays, but Pulumi is really new, and it started with the Gen AI immediately. So you can very clearly see the downsides in this one. There is a potential complexity for if you have larger projects. I think this is true for any IAC, but if you do this wrong, you do it really wrong, because then you have nothing. If I screw up my Bicep files, I at least have the Bicep. If I screw up my Pulumi, including configuration, I have C# and no one can easily port that to cloud instructions. Yeah. And we mentioned this, Terraform is really, really big and really, really popular. And Pulumi is, well, not small, but it's newer.
And the advantage for Bicep or ARM is that it's directly supported by Microsoft, so you know it's good. And in this case, you still tied to the interpreter and the
yes, you're adding a layer of complexity, a potential layer of failure. Yeah, if you wanna use this, it might have some additional cost. I didn't find it that expensive. I'll show you, because I'm not sure anymore, because I immediately wrote up as I would be willing to pay this, but there are some cost considerations where we would be interested in. And then my absolute least favorite, which I would have shown you if we could have gotten into the cloud, and I'll try again just to make sure that we're getting there again. Yep, this time I'm getting a message, so hooray, the delayed demo can continue. There we go. I do not have access, and that is very clearly because I'm in the wrong directory. So let's switch directories. Of course, then I can do the entire process again. I'm fine with that.
At least we're getting something.
At least we're getting something. And now we are in my personal account. And there we go. This is the, I'm looking at the Pulumi, and I'll copy the link. Let's just look at the storage accounts that I've created just recently. Storage accounts. So, did we create any storage account? Well, there's the resource group, and there's the storage account, right?
There's some sort of.
But there's so there's a bit of randomized stuff at the end, a bit of clutter, including on the resource group and also on my storage account. This is called auto-naming, and this is to prevent collisions. It makes sense, but I want control. When I name my resource something, I want it to be named that and not something different. And that's this is a feature that they use to make sure that there's no problems. You can configure it somehow. I'm pretty sure the AI told me to actually choose the name that you've chosen and let it just, collapse on collision. But by default, it will use auto-naming. Yes, and if you ever forget to turn it off, you will
get a lot of clutter.
Yes, and you have no idea where your resource is because the name is often how I refer to my resources.
Especially in a few months, if another developer goes into your resources and thinks,
yes.
What the heck?
So no, I'm not a big fan of auto-naming, but it did deploy. So hooray! Let's just review all the pros and cons again, shall we? I mentioned the AI.
Yes.
If it works, it works. It's really cool because they've integrated this really well. But it is an AI, so in the end,
still a bit of hit and miss.
Their docs are good, and they've used only their docs as input, so it's quite powerful. But once you start asking questions that it doesn't know the answer to, and I had a few, it will start basically just lying to you, which is not really different from a person, so it's really mimicking humans there, but it's not what I wanted. I've shown you the demo, but basically the picture is just to see what we're doing.
One more question, because in the demo you provided the environment, the dev, the stack, and I also saw you have a YAML parameter file where you can address parameters per stack, or is that correct?
Yes. So you can, you saw correctly. I closed the project, I think. But you have basically, like with normal environments, you have YAML files per environment.
Yeah.
And I'll just show. Let's go to Pulumi.com and just go to the docs. Oh, first I'll show you the pricing that you were asking about. And they've hidden the cost, which is always a great idea. But if
for teams, it's okay. I get what you mean.
It's not a lot, but for large companies, I would be interested why they're not showing their price. Let's say that. But the docs are really interesting. So there's a lot of docs, and they also really explain well all the kinds of concepts. So just to get started, that I showed you earlier. They use cookies, also very important. But they explain what's a stack, what's a project. So just to answer your question in Pulumi language, stack is an isolated, independently configurable instance of a Pulumi program. Or in human language, it's an environment.
Yeah. You can create for each environment different parameters, so you can tweak.
And just to show you the, this is a different project, and I named the stack demo here, so you can see. Yes, it has a demo.yaml, okay. And that's where the specific configuration for that stack will be, just as if you would have created.
How would that be used inside your C#? Can you reference it?
Yes, but also it picks it up. Pulumi picks it up automatically if it's needed. So some files they need to adhere to a certain naming scheme, but then they just automatically will retrieve that at the correct time.
Sounds interesting.
So that's Pulumi, which I think infrastructure as code is. It's slowly going from a nice thing that you really should be paying attention to something that's basically a necessity. That's part of your job. It's even better, yeah.
Yeah, you saw it because in the early days, especially on-premise, you had separate divisions, departments where you had administrators, engineers, purely for the infrastructure.
Yeah.
And now you have DevOps where the teams do both, and now it's good to integrate it more into your solution and really tie it up next to your code because it's one single thing and should be treated as that.
Yes, because it makes so much sense. We used to have dev and then test and then security and then deployment, but all those things are related. So unless you are a very, very sluggish and slow company where you need to adhere to 1,000 laws and everyone needs to have their job so specialized that they can't gain a broad view, I would advocate for, if you're going to integrate stuff anyway, if you're going to go DevOps or DevSecOps, let's use the same language for that. Let's use the same tooling for that, because why would I need to learn thousands of different tools and languages just to do my one job, which is DevOps? And if you don't use your IAC, if you don't integrate that basically like security or verification from the start, then at the end you're going to have to make some dirty, non-optimal decisions. While if you basically start with thinking, how would I form this into a cloud, and how would I use my different stacks, my different environments, so that I can test this code correctly, so that I can make sure that people can actually see this code, see the app on an acceptance server. Do we even need that, etc., etc. If you start with that idea, you're going to prevent you and your team from having a lot of headaches down the road.
Yeah, and also makes it possible to ship faster and earlier to get that flow going.
Yeah.
For development. So that's a great way to work with your infrastructure.
Yeah, so I'm a big fan. I'm pretty sure that this is also going to have some challenges that will still need to be solved. But like most new things I discover, I want to keep an eye on this, because I'm pretty sure that this has the potential to go really, really big.
Yeah, sounds good.
Thanks so much, and we hope to see you another time. Bye-bye.
See ya.